Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. This was the one where you read it and you are just. If you weren't already sold when you read this book, you are certainly sold. Prisoner of Azkaban starts off with Harry blowing up his aunt in the living room simply because she is talking crap about him and his family, and even calls his mother a bitch. And so her blowing up is the physical representation of him getting mad and his anger being bestowed on his aunt. I forget his aunt Marge, which I believe is Uncle Vernon's sister, if I'm correct on that. Help me if I'm wrong on that. But anyway, Harry is livid. He quite literally blows his aunt up into a balloon. Even though Harry understands the repercussions, it's quite cool to see him take a stand and act out, even though there will be repercussions. And so Harry ends up storming out after blowing up his aunt and runs out into the street, and he could swear that he sees this black dog like watching him keenly from afar or from across the street. And as he's out there, he gets picked up by the night bus, which is, man, this book, it's really hard because I just finished book 4, which I'm about to talk about. So feel free to check out that video here. If you are enjoying this ride, I have literally been doing this at 6 p.m. tonight, as my wife is on a night shift, and I have been talking about starting a book tube or tube book channel for a long time. This is the impetus. If there were, I know it's cliche, but if there was one book series to do it, this is the one. And after reading book 3 and then book 4, I was like, why not now? So anyway, getting back to the plot, the night bus rescue. Harry is on the street, he's on the corner, he gets picked up by the night bus. The conductor of the night bus, Stan Shunpike, I think it is, he basically picks up stranded wizards and takes them back to London. And so that's what happens for Harry. He's out there because he's pissed off. He just blew up his aunt into literally a balloon, and Stan picks him up, and he goes on this almost hallucination type ride where this bus warps in time and delivers him back to his desired destination, which is London, where he is then met by Cornelius Fudge. And I am forgetting what happens. Oh, right. So he meets Cornelius Fudge, and Cornelius Fudge basically meets Harry because he has recently heard the news that this will come to be known. This is a spoiler, so leave this video if you have not read this book. Cornelius Fudge is watching after Harry due to the escape of his godfather, which is Sirius Black. And Sirius Black is escaped Azkaban, which is like the wizard prison, and he's a very deadly guy, allegedly. And so Cornelius Fudge is there to protect him. That's why he literally handholds Harry off the bus. And then Harry runs into the Weasley family, and they're going back and forth if they should tell Harry about Sirius, which is Harry's godfather. And I believe Arthur does, even though Miss Weasley does not want to tell him. But he's like, I gotta look out for the homie. He's about to be going to Hogwarts, and he needs to know what potential dangers lie ahead of him this year, because Lord knows he has already been through some shit for year 1 and year 2. Last thing he needs to have is somebody sideswipe him and not be informed. So I think Arthur's doing a good deed, and he tells Harry, and then year 3 is upon us. As Harry is on the Hogwarts Express, just hit my mic. He is with Ron, and I think he has Professor Lupin, which is the 3rd-year Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher, on the train with him. And all of a sudden it gets cold and dark, and the Dementors enter the scene. And this is the first time that we hear about the Dementors, who are the guards of the Prisoner of Azkaban. And basically, the Dementors, anytime they pop into the scene, they have this overwhelming presence of depression and coldness. And I think in the book it says as though it feels as though you'll never be happy again. And so that's kind of an underlining theme that we will get into in part 2 of this video, where we just talk about metaphors and life lessons and that kind of thing. And at the end of this video, we'll talk briefly about my favorite chapter, your favorite chapter. Comment below. Let me know your favorite chapter. And then also we'll talk about favorite quotes. And then we'll talk lastly about dog-eared pages. I want to know your dog ears so I can dog-ear my book more. Getting back to it. This is part 1. Just quick highlights. I really want to know like what parts stick out to you too. So this is kind of just like a ramble about the book. That's why you're here, is because you love Harry Potter, I would assume. So if you're watching this, this may be your 50th video on Harry Potter. I don't know. But this is fresh off the dome. I just finished this book about 2 weeks ago. Finished this one 2 days ago, and I've now started the Order of Phoenix. So where were we? Oh, the Dementors. Yeah, they're like the dark, dirty dudes who can give the kiss of death, which basically sucks your soul out, which happens in the end of this book. But Lupin reveals himself as essentially the quick hero. He already gets a quick win and proves himself worthy, much more worthy than Book 2's defense against the dark arts teacher. Fraud guy. Lockhart. Yeah, Lockhart sucked. He might have sucked worse than the guy who had Voldemort on the back of his noggin. I think he did. Honestly, at least that guy was like... at least he was like for a cause. Lockhart was just a straight up fraud, which sucked. But anyway, Lupin is the guy. They're going to Hogwarts, and Lupin does his Patronum charm to basically get rid of the Dementor. Also, it's really cool because Lupin is the first professor that we see come onto the scene who is a legitimate caretaker. Whenever the Dementors try to basically dement Harry's existence, he's there to not only acknowledge it as though his feelings are validated, but also he gives him advice, and he's just automatically this caretaker, which is great, and gives him some chocolate, because the thing you need after you're depressed is chocolate, or after a Dementor makes you feel as though all life is bleak. He gives him a chocolate frog, which that little nugget, that little Easter egg is, man, you just feel like a kid. That's one of the themes in this book that I love so much. I think we've all hopefully had a teacher that really cared about their students, and Lupin is the exemplary figure of that in the Harry Potters thus far. As we begin to navigate the third year, Fred and George end up giving Harry the Marauders map, which that's like one of the coolest parts. Is basically it's this map that gives Harry the powers to understand everybody's whereabouts and their footsteps as they're navigating the layout of Hogwarts. And this is important because Harry didn't get a letter signed saying that he could go to Hogsmeade, which is the town right outside of Hogwarts, and it's this whole hullabaloo. And Fred and George, being Ron's brothers and being comrades of Harry, they're like, hey, we know you need this more than us. Sneak into Hogsmeade, go get you some butterbeer. And so they hand Harry the map, and it actually ends up being quite useful for various reasons further down the plot. What's really interesting is the quirkiness of how to like get the map to work, like what you have to say to it. And people reading this book, I'm sure you lit up during this part, and if you didn't, you have no soul. Maybe you should go back and read this, or like, I don't know, be a kid, let live, you know. But whenever they say, I solemnly swear I am up to no good, and they like tap the map and it shows people's footsteps as they're navigating Hogwarts, it's just so sick. And then to like put it up, like whenever Snape comes, it says mischief managed, and then it hides the magical aspect of the map. Anyway, that's really cool because he can see where people are and sneak around and go to Hogsmeade or see other passageways like the one to the Whomping Willow later in the book. I'm sure there are so many things that I'm forgetting, but just looking at this book, these are like the things, the key plot components, or like the pillars that I'm remembering. And again, in the end, we'll go over bookmark pages, favorite chapter, and best quotes. After Harry gets the Marauder's map, we are delving into the mystery of Scabbers. There's this controversy or conflict between Ron and Hermione because Ron has Scabbers, this rat, and Hermione has this cat, and the cat's always like chasing the rat, and Ron gets pissed because Scabbers disappears for a while and he can't find him. And Crookshanks, Hermione's cat, seems to know Scabbers is not what Ron and Harry think. And so, anyway, Harry ends up sneaking into Hogsmeade, where he learns the story of Sirius Black as he is sitting underneath the table in under his invisibility cloak with Ron and Hermione. He overhears the bar host. What was her name? You know what I'm talking about? What was her name? Anyway, drop it below. I'm forgetting her name right now. But he overhears the story of Sirius Black, how Sirius allegedly killed 12 Muggles, and Wormtail. I'm forgetting his real name at this point, but if you remember the Marauder's map in the book, it was created by Prongs, Padfoot, Wormtail, and Moony. You come to find out in the end, Prongs meaning pronghorn because his Patronus is a stag or a deer. But anyway, Wormtail is an animagus, whatever it is. And so all of them learned how to transform themselves into animals. And so that is uncovered too. The thought is, at this time, Harry is hearing the story, and he hears about Sirius Black, and he can't believe that he betrayed his family. To everyone's knowledge, Sirius Black was given the password or the whereabouts of James and Lily. Meanwhile, this year at Hogwarts, Hagrid has been his name has been cleared from last year because Tom Riddle was ultimately to blame for the Chamber of Secrets and not Hagrid. So Hagrid becomes a teacher, and he's the teacher of magical creatures, one of which is the Hippogriff. And the one in particular in this book, Buckbeak, which I swear I might name my next dog or something Buckbeak, because Buckbeak is just I just love Buckbeak. I love Hagrid too. I mean, those two characters are great. But Buckbeak, part of the Hippogriff, which is on the front cover too. I mean, it's an integral part of this book, so I'm glad I just remembered it. But Hagrid, being the teacher of magical creatures, he is starting his first year, and he's trying to do a good job, and he's concerned that he's not. And he tells all the students, you have to be respectful of these hippogriffs, and you must bow, and before approaching them, the hippogriff must bow to you. Anyway, Harry pets the hippogriff, goes on a ride of the hippogriff, and Draco, being douchey Draco, doesn't get the bow, and he's like, oh, anybody can pet the hippogriff. And of course, he tests the boundaries of that, and the hippogriff scratched him or bites him or something. He's bitching and moaning all year and putting Hagrid's freshly administered job in jeopardy because he's just causing havoc like Draco does. Anyway, this ultimately leads to the hippogriff being put into jeopardy of being executed by the executioner. And I think it was Crouch who came to Hogwarts with him. And so there's this side plot developing of this hippogriff as well. And Harry, Ron, and Hermione trying their best to be there for Hagrid. With Fudge coming to town, if you will, or coming to Hogwarts, starts to illuminate this underlying theme of bureaucracy and the calls that were being made from within that were more or less bullshit, but were powered by Malfoy's father, Lucius, threatening them, and due to him being an affluent or wealthy person, he had a lot more say than he otherwise should, and just like, hey, we're gonna kill Buckbeak. And so anyway, that ensued, and it's the foreshadowing of this bureaucracy that you come to see issues with in book 4, into book 4, into book 5. And so anyway, that's unfoiling too. And so there are like so many side plots. You got the goofiness of all these different classes, like in herbology, like the mandrakes, and just all this whimsy. I mean, you got the Professor Trelawney, which is like this teacher who can foresee things that are going to happen, and she tells Harry he's got the Grim, and he's like, bullshit, you tell everybody they got the Grim, which basically means that he's going to die. And she's always like spouting off these visions that she has, and the trio, Hermione, Ron, and Harry, are always just like cutting up and telling jokes, and that kind of highlights the personality of kids too in class, and how like, you know, they'll joke around in the class that they don't see use in. Anyway, all these things are boiling up in school. Meanwhile, the story of Sirius is starting to become the forefront, or the biggest narrative of the story. This plot of them trying to find Scabbers, and they see Scabbers run off. Harry sees this dog that he saw earlier on, and Crookshanks runs over there too, and so they're all following him. Basically, they see that it goes into the Whomping Willow. Through the Whomping Willow, it goes into the Shriek Shack. And the Shriek Shack was like this haunted house in Hogsmeade, but actually it wasn't haunted. It was the fact that Moony, he's called Moony because he's an animagus, and he transforms into... Oh, sorry, my bad. He wasn't an animagus. He just was a werewolf. And all the 3 friends became animaguses, so he didn't have to like be that alone. The Shriek Shack is called the Shriek Shack. That's hard to say. The Shriek Shack is called the Shriek Shack because Moony used to go in there and howl, and so everybody always thought it was like cursed or whatever, but it was just Moony just being Moony. Like, he's just being a werewolf out there. And anyway, comes to find out that Sirius is like, you know, they chase him up to the Shriek Shack, and he turns Scabbers back into a human, which is Wormtail. And he knew that it was Wormtail the whole time because he saw a picture of Ron and their family in Egypt for the vacation last summer in the newspaper. And so he saw that he was like missing the finger, and all that was left of Wormtail after the scene that Sirius had caused where he killed like 12 people was Wormtail's finger, which is why they assumed Wormtail had died, and then the 12 muggles being dead. But in fact, it was Wormtail cutting his finger, going through the drains as a mouse, as a rat. and so that was the story that had evolved over these 13 years. But in fact, it was Wormtail. Sirius unfolds the story of how it was actually all Wormtail setting up Sirius, and that is why Sirius was in Azkaban. However, Snape follows the crew and thinks that Sirius is to blame, and so he's about to like kill Sirius or something, because they used to have beef back in the day. So he has like this vengeance that he wants to get anyway. It's really quite crazy because Harry, Ron, and Hermione all gang up on Snape like that after 5 minutes ago thinking Sirius was like the bad guy, but they deduct the fact that Sirius is telling the truth. Lupin also thought it was Sirius, but then it's all uncovered, and it just blows your mind. I mean, this chapter is so good. However, Moony forgot to take his potion that Snape had been giving him all year, and he turns into a werewolf. And so that kind of throws the whole plan of them getting Sirius out of there into chaos. They are going back, and I think it's the bureaucracy again. They're going to end up killing Sirius, but come to find out, Hermione reveals the fact she's been using this time turner to go to multiple classes. And anyway, Dumbledore tells both Hermione and Harry that if they do a good job, they can save more than one life. And so they crank back time. Hermione punches Malfoy in the face. She got to see it again, so that was awesome. That was like a fun Easter egg. And she punched him because, again, Draco was being a dick about over-exaggerating the fact that he was hurt whenever he really wasn't. He was healed a long time ago from Buckbeak. He was just trying to cause harm to Buckbeak and Hagrid. What they end up doing is they have their witnessing time outside of time itself, and so they're like clones looking at themselves, and it's just nuts. And they bring Buckbeak in the woods, and so they save Buckbeak, and Dumbledore knows all this is going on. Meanwhile, the plan is that, because they knew that Sirius is going to get captured, is to take Buckbeak to save Sirius. Right, but I forgot to mention the reason that Sirius is going to be detained and killed is because Wormtail got away. And so there wasn't proof that Wormtail was still around, and so it was hard to justify this. And so anyway, when they shapeshift time, all of these collapsing negative things are rewatchable. So you see Buckbeak as they go down to save Buckbeak, and they like throw the pebble to warn that the executioner's coming. Lupin's transformation in there, and have Pettigrew's escape, as well as after saving Sirius from Lupin because he's turned into, his werewolf self. They're fleeing the scene, and the Dementors, because they've been trying to find Sirius all book, finally find Sirius because he's no longer Padfoot, and Harry and him have gotten familiar. Harry knows that he's his godfather, and Harry's pumped that he has the potential of not being with the Dursleys anymore, but the friggin' Dementors come and try to give him the kiss of death. That cold panic ensues, and they start attacking Sirius, and then Harry's left there trying to fend them off with the Patronus that he learned from Lupin in the dark arts. And then Harry collapses because there are just too many of them. While all this is happening, before he goes to the hospital wing and figures out that Sirius is detained, he sees somebody across the lake save both him and Sirius's life. And who he thinks he sees is his father, because he sees the stag, Patronus, come and wipe the Dementors away. And so then we get to the part with Hermione and the Time Turner. They're in the hospital wing. They get the Time Turner. They learn about Hermione's ability to, shapeshift time and warp reality. And so they use that for good. And they go out. They save Buckbeak. They know that Buckbeak can fly. They see Moony turn into a werewolf, and Padfoot try to defend Harry, Ron, and Hermione from Lupin. And they distract Lupin by howling, and so Lupin leaves, and Padfoot's good, and then Padfoot meets up with Harry. But as they're slowly dying from these Dementors, Harry is across the lake looking at himself dying, and he's like, "Where's my father? I know my father's going to show up. He's going to show up any minute." And he's looking at the life being sucked out of himself and Sirius, and realized who saved him and who had the strong Patronus, or Patronus strong enough to save him, was in fact himself. You just gotta read it. Read it again. I'm gonna read it again. Being that this is the first time I read these books, I listened to them on audiobook once upon a time, but it just doesn't hit the same. These books resonate so deeply. The stories are so captivating. And so, anyway, going back to the part, Harry's shapeshifter self cast the Patronus to save him and Sirius. However, this time, because they have saved our boy Buckbeak, they fly Buckbeak, hence the cover. Hermione and Harry fly Buckbeak up to the tower to save Sirius. And so, by shape-shifting time and using that power that Hermione had been using all year to be in multiple classes, they right two wrongs. Harry learns the tale of who Padfoot is, who Sirius is, who Lupin is, who Prongs is, and who Wormtail is. Wormtail escapes, Sirius escapes, and Moony ends up retiring because he feels as though he has brought too much attention to Hogwarts negatively. Even though Dumbledore had the trust and admiration for Moony, he knows that werewolves are typically looked down upon in the wizardly community. Now that people know that he is in fact a werewolf, he retires. Anyway, it's a theme about prejudice in this book, and it starts not only in the first book with Muggles, but it recurs for werewolves. And even though they're doing good, they're like kind, aren't looked at in that light. And that actually is touched on even more so in book 4 with giants and elves, house elves, that is. That is the conclusion of Lupin for this book. Dumbledore apologizes about the bureaucracy and political pressure. Lupin understands, and Lupin, or Moony, returns the Marauders map, understanding that Harry may need it in the years to come. As this story concludes, Sirius, now being far, far away, writes Harry a letter. Gosh, that letter is a deep one. It uncovers many truths, that letter. It tells him, that he hopes to have Harry live with them one day. He tells him that the firebolt. Right, this book is the first book where Harry actually competes in all 3 Quidditch matches, and at one point his firebolt is thrown into the Whomping Willow, or his Nimbus 2000, and he gets a firebolt for Christmas. And so at the end of the book, they were wondering during the whole book, but at the end of the book, Sirius talks about that. Golly, what else? Now that he knows Sirius is his godfather, Sirius writes him like a final PS and gives him the letter that the Dursleys would not, and that's approval to go to Hogsmeade. So he doesn't have to sneak around in the invisibility cloak and use the Marauders map for that. No, he will use it for other needs in the future. Gosh, there are just so many gems in this book. Like, this is going to be a pretty long video, as are the rest, but this is for people who really like Harry Potter, I'm really interested, before we dive into these next 2 parts real quick, to hear anything that you think I missed that was vital or crucial. Honestly, there are so many, so I could talk about this book for hours, but I'm trying to keep it somewhat short. And so for part 2, just for metaphors and life lessons, one of the key themes in this is Lupin's identity, him hiding the fact that he's a werewolf simply due to people potentially not loving him for who he is. I think it's important, whether you're talking about Harry Potter or dorking out about something else, I think it's a theme about just being who you are, whether society or what have you doesn't like certain aspects of your personality. If it's true to you in your heart, be that, as long as it's for a good cause. Don't let the feelings of being unloved outweigh the ones of those who do, because there are definitely people who love you regardless of circumstance. I think, like the last book, highlights family we choose over family we're given. So obviously Harry still has a struggle with the Dursleys. He ends up blowing up his aunt into a balloon. Quite literally, Sirius was picked family. He's the godfather of Harry, and so it's the first person that loves Harry just for being Harry, not for who he is, like the famous wizard who lived, but he just loves Harry and loves the Potters. And so it's a beautiful theme to watch that relationship be formed. That's probably like one of the main reasons that I love this book so much, is because the inclusion of Sirius and Lupin, for that matter. Lupin is a compassionate teacher, so latching on to that and teaching in a way such that is nurturing to these kids. And then also like the time turning. You can't always turn back time, but if you can before it's too late and something bad could happen, whether it's from your own actions or others, if you can change the outcome, why wouldn't you? It could be a note on defiance. I like to think that it's largely a note on doing the right thing and having people around you who support doing the right thing. All right, last part. It is freaking 11 p.m. and I'm still up doing this. So anyway, last part of this book is going to be favorite chapter, 2 favorite quotes, 3 dog-eared pages, rapid fire. Here we go. Favorite chapter. Mine's going to be the Marauders Map chapter. I just thought it was so cool. I know they rag on Snape. You're torn between laughter and feeling, sorry for Snape, but I always laugh at that part. The chapter is called the Marauders Map 183. Yeah, that was my favorite. 2 favorite quotes from this. Let's see. I have them over here. Oh, I mentioned it before. I solemnly swear that I'm up to no good. That's for the Marauders Map. I just think that's so clever. So that's one. And actually, if you watched the first video, you will have seen this. This is my daily reflections that I have here. And one of the quotes at the bottom that I like to look at is actually Sirius's quote. And it is, "We've all got both light and dark inside of us. What matters is the part we choose to act on. That's who we really are." Yeah, feeding the good or feeding the bad, whichever we choose to act on, that's who we really are. I love that. Honorable mention for the Dementors, because they play such a theme in this book and largely about depression, which I know a lot of us face, and so I got to mention it. This is where Lupin said, "You are not weak. The Dementors affect you more because there are horrors in your past that the others don't have." And I think that's indicative of, to anybody who's faced trauma, a lot of people can't understand. And so just because you are facing depression or sadness, it doesn't make you weak. It just means that you face things that others may not have. And so the Dementors in this book symbolize depression and signify horrors that some people may have that others don't. Yeah, that was another good one. And lastly, 3 dog-eared pages. As I'm turning to these, go ahead and comment yours below. Your favorite page. I would love to know your favorite page in this book. I'm making an attempt to comment on every comment. And so first, I have page 137. This is where Neville uses the ridiculous spell against the Bogart. And this is where Lupin asks the students, what they're most afraid of. And Neville says Professor Snape. And so Neville casts the ridiculous spell onto Snape, and then he turned into Snape, but in roller skates, wearing his grandmother's clothes. And I just thought that was such a funny little bit. Second is about the Marauders Map. It is page 355, the Animagi. Basically, it's the story that Lupin is telling the trio about who they are and the importance of friendship that Lupin witnessed with Padfoot and Prongs and Wormtail at the time. It's a really big part of the character development. So 355, and then lastly, 415. This is where Sirius flies off with Buckbeak. I mean, that's just a heroic ending to that story of Sirius as he becomes the good guy who lives instead of executed. And Buckbeak too. That is The Prisoner of Azkaban. I've made it through 3 book reviews tonight. If you appreciate this, please like and subscribe. And as always, let me know what parts of the book you loved or maybe that I left out due to being too tired. If you care to hang with me for book 4, I'm going to go ahead and link that above and we'll dive into it. Peace.